In this video, we're gonna check out and review the Strauss NF-3s and what my thoughts are as a mixer after owning them and using them for a solid 6 months.
Let's go!
A little background history for you. My name is Dee Kei. I'm the host of the Mixing Music Podcast, the #1 post-production audio podcast in the world. I love monitoring, and as a mixer, I find that monitors are extremely important, and I've tried so many different monitors. The most recent pairs that I've owned previous to these are ATC SCM45s that I have a review about on this channel if you want to subscribe, as well as the PMC IB1Ss, which I never actually got around to reviewing. But today, the video is all about these Strauss NF-3s. They're so much smaller than what I've been using in the past and still just as expensive. Why are these so crazy as far as pricing and visually? They just look so weird, but how do they sound? As a mixer, monitors are extremely important. One of the most important things to look out for when designing a speaker is distortion, which for us means transient response. How well does the transients cut through the speakers? How much of that fidelity is retained when the kick drum or the snare, anything percussive with very large transients, how well does that perceived? How well is that pushed through? I loved my ATCs because of the glorious mid-range response. The mid-range was very clear, and any mix that I did through the ATC translated super duper well. From a hi-fi or listening perspective, they weren't the best speakers. They sound like shit, to be honest, but they're amazing for engineers looking to get the right sound. The PMCs had an amazing low end, the tightest low end that I've ever heard in any sort of speaker cabinet. But these Strauss, I think, combines the two and adds a third element, the transient response. My good friend Gerhard, who's a mastering engineer out of Canada, said that you can always change the tonal balance of a speaker using some outboard DSP or some outboard gear processing to equalize and balance out the tonal frequencies. But the one thing that you can't change with the speaker and its design is the transient response. If you're an audio engineer or looked into audio speakers in the past, then you understand the word that we use to describe speakers that translate the transients really well are called fast. They're very fast speakers. Not that the woofer's moving any faster, but more importantly, they stop on a dime. When the kick drum hits on slower speakers, they go woo, woo, and leave this background noise after the hit has been made. But with fast speakers, it stops on a dime. This is really, really great when trying to hear compression, limiting, saturation, any sort of dynamic processing. You want to be able to hear this stuff to know how the dynamics works, and if you're squishing it too much or if there's more headroom to squish more to get things to sound louder. The Strauss NF-3s have hands down the best transients I've ever heard in any speaker. In fact, the first time hearing these, it was kind of freaky. I've never heard compression more clearly. I've never heard limiting more clearly in my entire life. Now, they come in a 5-inch woofer design. They're very small and compact, but the designer took the time to find the right components, the right woofer, the right tweeter, and get them to balance just right. I think there's some special secret sauce going on about the woofer and having the least amount of mechanical resistance around the rim. I don't know, something crazy is going on, but either way, Strauss has created a set of speakers that are the least distorted I've ever heard. The transient response is incredibly satisfying. Sometimes I play first-person shooters or like games on this computer and on these speakers, and even the bullets, not just music, but like the bullets and the sound effects just sound so crisp. It's absolutely mind-blowing, an experience I've never had before. Now, these speakers are small. The woofers are only 5 inches, right? But the most surprising thing about these speakers is that the low-end extension is actually pretty deep. Without any sort of processing or any sort of tonal balance control, they're pretty NS-10 reminiscent. Very mid-range 4, two-way design with the tweeter kind of sound. But the real magic sauce that I've discovered is with something like Sound ID with SonarWorks. Once I've calibrated the speakers, these sound absolutely insane. I know that using SonarWorks is very polarizing. Some people swear against it, some people swear by it, but the point is, it sounds amazing with or without the processing. I personally prefer the processing, but even without it, you get a really clear mid-range with punch that you've never heard in your life. Without Sonarworks, the bass extends actually a little bit further than the ATC SCM45s, which is incredible because the ATCs have 6.5-inch woofers, dual 6.5-inch woofers. This has a single 5-inch woofer. At first, you listen to the low end of these speakers and you're like, maybe it's not enough, but it's properly extending. It's very balanced. I don't want to say it's flat, and I don't like the sound of flat speakers to begin with. Even when I equalize them with something like Sonarworks, I actually customize the frequency curve to match what I like, which is usually a little bit of a boost of lower mid-range. I like that sound. It helps me make mixes that translate better. Probably because I spent time on the ATCs and that's how they naturally sound. With Sonarworks though, the bass extension, top end, and mid-range are absolutely phenomenal. There's this weird phenomena. You get really great stereo imaging, really great punch, but compared to the ATCs, they go lower, but the mid-range is not as focused. It doesn't mean that they're bad, just the ATCs are just phenomenal with their mid-range, and there's so much focus in the mid-range that you can nitpick everything. These ones are not as focused as the ATCs. In fact, they kind of sound scooped compared to the ATCs, but the mid-range is still clear and very easy to mix with. I think these are also a lot more pleasing to listen to than the ATCs, but there is one downfall to these speakers. Although the low end is great and extends really well, the punch is amazing, they still feel like a smaller speaker. It's not distracting and it's still very pleasing to listen to, but you can tell that they're not big Augsburgers, big mains. They're near field monitors and they're meant to feel that way. I don't think that's a bad thing though, because then I can actually get real up close and personal with them and I'm able to get more critical with them. I spent hours and days working on the speaker placement in this room. This room is not the biggest room that I'm using right now, but it sounds great. I've got the acoustics figured out in this room. For some weird reason, with the smaller design and how it works with the room, even when I took these speakers to Bob Horn's place, if you're familiar with his work, the speakers sounded better, closer. In fact, right now they're set up to be a little bit uncomfortably close, but they sound the best in this position. You lose a little bit of that imaging, that left and right imaging when they're that close, but in exchange, you get a much more full frequency response. I would like to say that it was the room, but it reacted the same way in Bob Horn's room as well, where his acoustics are top-notch, elite grade. Now, for the amp that I'm using with this set of speakers, I originally bought Amphion 700, a Class D amp. I've never bought speakers with a separate amp before, so this was an experiment for me. I bought that and I liked the sound of it. I didn't know much better. I saw online that there was a sale going on for the Aventone CLA 200s, which are supposed to be matched up with the NS10s that Aventone makes. I got that power amp, which is Class AB, because I heard some rumors about Class A or AB or whatever compared to Class D. I tried him, I swapped him over. Amphion makes a phenomenal amp, but in this case, I liked the Class AB Aventone, which is great news, right? Because now you can spend less money and get a better sound, in my opinion. The Amphion had a really nice glassy top end and a really smooth low end. The Aventone were a little bit dirtier and maybe a little bit more punchy because it was a lot more mid-range focused. So I decided to get rid of the Amphion and I kept my Aventone CLA 200. The speakers by themselves are about $8,000 for the pair without the amp. And the Aventone amp is a little bit less than $1,000. So about $9,000 or $10,000 after tax. Is it worth it? The short answer is yes, it's absolutely worth it. But I think that there's a little bit more explaining to do beforehand. One, this is a very small and boutique company, so the demand if you want to sell it is very low. There's not many people that know about this company, let alone that are willing to pay extra for them. I'm one of 3 people in LA to own anything from this company. One is my business partner, Lou, who I convinced to get the same exact pair of speakers, and the other person is the one that recommended these speakers to me, which is Jessie Ray Ernster, who mixed Woman by Doja Cat and all of Burna Boy's stuff. I personally don't think I'm going to be switching speakers anytime soon. In fact, if I get another set of speakers, I'm going to be adding to them. I think these are going to be my forever near fields, and I hope to get some ATCs again for like some mid or far field monitors in the future. I think those two would be the most complementary with each other, but I am really stuck on these. So again, the pros is that they're really, really punchy. The compression, transient, any sort of dynamic processing is gonna be really easy to listen and hear, and it's gonna help you mix. The translation is great. It works in smaller rooms as well as near fields in bigger rooms. The downside is the resale marketplace for these is not that good, and not many people know about them. A lot of people don't like the way they look, and some people love the way they look. For me, I'm kind of torn. They look like they're from, they were built on the Death Star, but at the same time, they're kind of goofy. I think my favorite thing about them is that they're horizontal, so I could put little knickknacks on top of them. Before we end the video, I just want to do a quick shout out. If you like to hear about audio and how to mix and how to be a better music producer, check out the Mixing Music Podcast. Again, it's the #1 post-production audio podcast in the world. And if you want access to exclusive content to get 3 times the amount of episodes, you can go to mixingmusicpodcast.com/exclusive. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to hear more about music and audio, please subscribe down below, leave a thumbs up, anything, leave a comment. All of these things really helps with discoverability as I grow my channel. Thank you so much. Happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy.